All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, my fellow beauty and barber professionals. Happy Black History Month, everybody. Happy Black History Month. But before we get started, let's take a quick commercial break. Happy Black History Month, my fellow beauty and barber professionals. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy, Senior Advocate of Politics, Beauty, and Barber. I am the president of the Concerned Beauty and Barber Professionals. For those of you that don't know, let me bring you up to speed. We are a two-in-one organization that first addresses the need for higher continuing education standards in the beauty and barber industry. And we address policy state to state that affects our industry. So we have been fighting for 10 years, beauty and barber professionals to strengthen and undergird our industry and have the respect that we so rightfully deserve. But this is Black History Month and wanted to bring you a special broadcast from the man himself, the author, Quincy T. Mills, y'all, cutting along the color line, Black barbers and barbershops in America. He was a part of our book club reading, and we are delighted to have you, sir.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on this Monday afternoon. Yes, so cutting along the color lines. This is Black history at its core, because the beauty and barber industries, this is the root, and this is where you started your work with this book, right, Mr. Mills?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I'm not sure if you want to introduce or you want me to go.
I want you to go for it, sir. Let you introduce yourself. I want you to have the floor. I don't want to talk. I want you to talk.
All right. Well, first, again, thanks so much for having me. Certainly, it's always a pleasure to be among folks in the barbering and beauty industry. So what I'm going to do today is we've got about 25 minutes right now. I want to do three sort of very quick things. First, I'm going to read a short essay that I wrote, and then I'll talk a bit about the history of barbering, very, very briefly, and then I'll sort of connect it to Black History Month and the reason why we're here. So, Antonio Johnson put together this really fantastic book titled "You Next: Reflections in Black Barbershops," which is a photo essay, essentially. So a number of photographs in Black barbershops across the country, and he asked a number of people to produce essays for that book. And he asked me to produce an essay that allowed me to reflect on the history of barbering and barbershops, which I thought was a fairly gargantuan task. Because, like, okay, you want me to do this in like a page? Like, this is not a whole lot. But I was excited to sort of think about again the work that I had that I had done producing this book, but also think a bit about my connections to barbering and its history. I should also briefly say again, I didn't actually introduce myself. So Quincy Mills, and I'm an associate professor of history at the University of Maryland, College Park. Originally from Chicago, spent a bit of time in New York, And this book, Cutting Along the Color Line, is my first book. I'm working on a second book, which is on civil rights fundraising. So the ways in which activists raise money to support other folks, activists who were fired from their jobs because they signed a petition to try to register to vote, to bail folks out of jail. It's essentially looking at all the sort of necessary money and the flow of capital through social movements and the larger struggle. So let me sort of begin with this essay. So Johnson's book was titled You Next. And for me, I couldn't think about the next. I had to think about the before. And so I titled my essay, and certainly the sort of term "you next" is what barbers would say to customers who are waiting in the chair, right? If it's their turn, they say, "You're next. Come on and get in the barber's chair." I titled my essay "You After," to center history. So I'm going to read that here first. What does it mean to be next? If we respond too quickly, the answer might turn to the individual with excitement, angst, or ambivalent expectations of the future. Yet, to be next encourages us to consider who and what we are following. Therefore, another way of considering time and one's place in it is to ask, what does it mean to come after? As a Black man, the grandson of a late barber and a historian of Black barbershops, it is humbling to reflect on the countless people who stood behind the barber's chair, sat and squirmed in the chair while being groomed, and waited in that row of seats for their turn and in community. Any history of Black barbershops is by necessity a collective one that includes the barber, the patron or customer, and the waiting public, all in concert. Black barbers came after a litany of Black men and women who define the American commercial ethos of customer service. Despite, in some cases, being dehumanized, disrespected, and disavowed, they brought immaculate shaves to all who sat in their chairs, even to enslavers. Barbering in the 19th and 20th centuries provided a path toward freedom and economic autonomy. All labor, all people want control over their lives and labors, which runs counter to the aims of a capitalist economy that requires labor to be in constant production. Barbering is an exit ramp from wage labor. Black men's objectives of controlling the fruits of their labor met Black customers' needs and desires of looking and feeling good. Black men have the freedom to seek out any barber of their choice, yet many frequent Black barbers because they trust these barbers know how to cut and trim curly hair at minimum and all hair types writ large. Beyond the expectations of skill, Black customers expect their barbers will appreciate the latest hairstyles and Black cultural production. This level of trust and intimacy is no small matter. The transaction between barber and customer is at once economic and personal. A barber could remake a man after a week of hard, dirty labor in a West Virginia coal mine. A hat constantly covering one's head as a Pullman porter on the train, or the intensity, toil, and sweat of practice from the upcoming Negro Baseball League contest. A shave and a haircut could instill confidence in the man preparing to ask his partner to marry him, preparing to stand before a congregation on Sunday to deliver the word of God, or even before an assemblage of protesters ready to disrupt a racist society, or simply in preparation to stand and be in public with pride in one's appearance and joy. But before the world sees these transformations, the shop serves as the inner world of construction. While men have waited to be the next person to undergo such transformations, they talk, they laugh, they sneer, debate, they shudder, they listen, and they sit in silence. The combination of barbers, patrons in the chair, and a group of people waiting, combined with the production of Black culture, have historically defined the very significance of these shops. Many Black men were in the barbershops when news spread of the Brown v. Board of Education decision, Shirley Chisholm's announcement of running for president of the United States, and Nelson Mandela's release from prison. They likely discussed the differences between freedom and liberation, manhood and personhood, and the state of the African diaspora. In all, historically, there were few places in the public sphere where Black men could escape the surveillance of a white public, pursue economic autonomy, and shape individual lives and worldviews. Considering who we come after makes being next all the more scary and glorious. And so, what this piece allowed me to do, frankly, right, was to, not simply just think about the history of barbering, but also to think about how barbers and beauticians and anyone who has stepped foot inside of a barbershop or a beauty shop can think and connect to that history. And so, one of the major findings from this book, if you haven't had a chance to read it, I hope that you do, and you can purchase it, or you can obviously get it from the public library. Right, I support public libraries. Is that one of the major findings that I had from doing the research and writing the book was that in the 19th century, during slavery, of course, a majority, probably mostly all, of the Black commercial barbershops exclusively groomed wealthy white businessmen and politicians and traveling men. This was the order of the day. So much so that if you look in the city directories of the time, 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, you'll see, usually the southern city directories had a C for colored next to the Black business owners. And so when you look up, find the classifieds, go to barbering, and you see C, 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 C next to all these men who were barbers. Very few, if actually no, white man who owned a barbershop. Again, largely because white men associated barbering with servile labor, with slave labor, and in some cases, right, with effeminate labor, because they shaved men for the most part, and shaving a man required you touching the man's face. White men thought that that was beneath them. And so you have all these sort of Black-owned barbershops who are grooming white men and making a lot of money doing it. This was a world of barbering that I was not familiar with. I was surprised to see and find, and it took me a while to frankly accept it, if that makes any sense. When I say accept it, I mean in the sense that even after the Civil War, so at the dawn of freedom, those Black barbers continued to exclusively groom white men to the extent that they did not allow Black men to come in to get shaved, largely because those white customers didn't want to be shaved next to a Black man being shaved. They didn't want to be shaved with the same razor that may have touched the face of a Black man. And these Black barbers capitulated to that market desires of white men to sort of itch their own fantasies of Black Black men being in service to them. And again, I was upset, but I had in some ways to make sense of it. I had to understand life in their particular worldview. And it became clear to me as I did additional research that these folks were doing what Paul Laurence Dunbar said, right? They were wearing the mask, right? They were finding their way in a market that was not equal. But when the shop closed at night, right, they use their resources, but also the shops in service of Black communities, right? So many of those barbers who groomed white men and made money from it, right? Lots of money. They were critical figures of the Black middle class. They funneled those resources to build housing in Black communities, to support schools, to, in some cases, certainly during slavery, they opened their shop to runaways, right, for the night, right? They had to be gone by morning. And so they used their resources in service of Black communities. Also, assisted Black folks who were entering politics. And And so part of the work in this book was to understand, okay, so when did things change and how? And much of the changes came between 1890 and 1920 or 1930. And this is a time where particularly German immigrants entered the field of barbering. They didn't mind being barbers, unlike native white men. They entered barbering, but also pushed to have licensing laws. And so the work that you all are doing with your organization, much of that work sort of stems from this larger moment. So these Germans wanted licensing laws. These licensing laws essentially were meant to decide who could enter barbering at the time. And again, this is the 1890s. The challenge for Black men was that they believed that these licensing laws were meant to push them out of the trade. And so they were, while they could have agreed with some of the objectives of some of these laws, they didn't think that it was going to be used to their benefit. In fact, they thought it was going to be used against them. And so so now one would have to, go to barber college. Well, as you might imagine, this is during Jim Crow. So Black folk weren't allowed into the barber college, right? You had to know the anatomy of the body. The shop had to be clean. This is the same time that the sanitation movement is coming about. The problem was that many of those Black barber shops were the shops that were under surveillance by the state to be sure that they were more sanitary, right? Because white barbers were arguing it's those quote unquote Negro barber shops you have to be concerned about. Those are the dirty shops, right? So those would be the shops that would be under surveillance much more than those white shops that were coming up. So this is happening at the same time that the Gillette safety razor comes out. And the safety razor essentially shifted the barber's work from mostly shaving, because now men can shave themselves at home, to mostly cutting hair. For native white men, they saw shaving as the effeminate part of the barber's job, but cutting hair as having more skill. And for white men, they thought that all skilled jobs were for them solely, right? And so it made the industry more palatable for them to enter barbering, right? And so native whites began to enter barbering in much larger numbers. They believed in this licensing law project. And this, again, I would argue, sort of worked to push Black barbers from downtown business districts to predominantly Black neighborhoods. It's also the time, again, same period, 1890s, 1920, where a new generation of Black men, and this is a generation of men who were born after the Civil War, came of age during the rise of Jim Crow, and they wanted to open shops grooming Black men, right? So this is all happening at the same time that caused this major shift, right, in Black barbers' customer base and their location. And so at a time where Black folks around the country are trying to navigate an emerging Jim Crow, they now have these institutions that are for them and that are geared to them. And indeed, in some ways, are for both their economy, but also their safety. And so the second part of the book essentially looks at the changes that happened in the 20th century and how Black barbershops emerged to be central institutions in Black communities across the country. And so as we think about Black History Month, yes, we will celebrate and talk about the Malcolm X and the Kingses and the Rosa Parks and Paul Robeson and Ella Baker, right? These sort of iconic heroes of activism, for sure. And we should now and forever and always. But we don't, I think, pay enough attention to the local folk who made history, frankly. We don't pay attention to everyday life as a site where history has always been produced and is continuing to be produced. And so to think about Black barbers and barbershops as sites of history, and, as you all know much better than me for sure, when you walk into Black beauty shop or barbershop, history is often displayed, right? History is often displayed in photographs, in magazines, in newspaper articles, whether it's the history of the particular owner of the shop or it's the history of Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali. or Shirley Chisholm, right? Like history is always present. And so, I think that there's a way in which, again, when we shine a light on, again, studying and appreciating Black history, that we not forget about how history actually gets made, which is usually the everyday folk that are among us daily. And so I'll sort of stop there, and I just want to say that this, I admire the work that you all are doing, because the activism and the advocacy is essentially working. And it's, as we know, change doesn't happen overnight, but it's working to sort of improve the industry, but also improve the work for people who are coming after you, right? To find a place and to find an industry that is more hospitable, that's more equitable, and that provides much more respect, as you said, Tamara, that I think you all deserve in this space. So, thank you. Happy to answer any questions or anything. But I know we have a little bit of time.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Mills, because, just the fact that you have, you wrote this book and you went in on the intricacies of our industry, history that we don't know. We don't know. And something you said in the very beginning, it says, who and what are we following? A lot of us don't know that, a lot of the monies that even undergirded the civil rights movement came from the beauty and barber industry. Like you say, those monies were funneled into our liberation.
Yeah.
And I don't think we even know that history, Professor Mills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would add, I mean, more specifically, I think, and barbers as individuals gave a lot of money, but beauticians as a group, Black beauticians as a group, not just gave a lot of money, but they organized considerably, much different than barbers. I think the story of beauticians is really fascinating, and particularly their work in the civil rights movement. It's just really astonishing because activists knew it. One, we know that strictly while men gave all the speeches, we know that women did all the organizing. So King, for example, knew to go to an organization of Black beauticians to help get things done and to help, because again, he knew that folks were coming in the beauty shop often, and he knew that these women knew how to organize, right, and they knew how to funnel money and organize money, and so. Look, this history, right? It's not. I mean, yes, I think there's enough about the history of the industry and Black folks in it to learn and know, but it's not confined to the industry itself, right? It's confined. It sort of, it transcends, right, all walks of life outside of even just the work of barbering and the beauty industry. So there's a lot there. And I think there's a lot to read. So we should definitely be proud, but also be motivated to know more.
Want to jump in and introduce yourself, Lady Danielle?
Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm so excited to see Mr. Quincy Mills again. I'm super excited. I feel like it should be a doctor there, right?
There is a doctor there. I have a PhD, so yes.
Okay,
Here is Dr. Quincy T. Mills.
So that's what was throwing me off. Okay, so I like to, be correct with my titles, but it's such a pleasure to speak with you again and just to hear the history is so rich and it's just so empowering. And one thing that you touched on that I also was thinking about is that how, when we do visit like Black History Month and we talk about the history and the different strides that were made, the barbers and the barbershops are kind of left out of that. Yeah. It's more focused on the hairstylists, the beauty salons, the beauty and politics. Mm-hmm. And so to hear it and to understand and read it from this perspective, I think just really gives a lot more meaning to our industry. So I guess I'm just really excited because history has a way of repeating itself. Yeah. And even right now, it's like we're still fighting for our rights. There's still, even in 2022, there's still segregation in our industry. There's still, racism. There's still different, different hurdles that we have to continually jump over. So I think it just really helps us to see where we started, where we've been, and we've come so far, but it's just a reminder that we have so far to go. There's so much more work that has to be done. So overall, just, I guess my question would be just, how was this experience for you? And I apologize if you touched because I was a few minutes late, but how was this experience for you overall? Just meeting with these different individuals and sitting in those barbershops. How did that make you feel?
Yeah, it was humbling, right? So the shops that I sat in were of older barbers because I wanted to interview them, right, for about their time in the 50s or 60s or 70s. And so I got to tell you, just one, getting access was one trying feat, because I had long dreadlocks at the time. And so, as yeah, you laughing because what to say.
Okay.
They didn't sort of they didn't want to see me as a black man with long hair, right? For them, that women wear long hair. For them, a man should have shortly cropped hair that's neat, that would be presentable. So even just getting a word in with them was quite trying and difficult, but also required me to simply just step back and understand it from their perspective, which was important. And then second, when I was able to talk to them, just again getting their rich history, outside of the romanticized framing that we have of barbershops as these great black, these country clubs for black men is fantastic. And it's like, nah, usually romance is not all that romantic. Right? So let's dig a little deep, right? And I think, it was great talking to those folks just to get a sense that no, this was, one, this, yeah, Barbara, these are businesses, right? And one of the most enlightening things that I learned from talking to older barbers was that, we celebrate the growth of afros and naturals in that time of Black Power, but afros and nachos damn near put us out of business, right? We didn't like it. It's not what we expect to hear. We expect to hear, oh yeah, Black Power. No. They were like, nah, 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 nah. Black Power is bringing us less money, right? So, again, which is not, not, there's no judgment there. It's like, yo, that's just real, right? And so, yeah, so to say it again, I think again, it was just humbling, really, really humbling to hear from them and talk with them.
Yeah, we're definitely a industry where we are very protective. So when you talk about access, we don't let everybody in. Like
That's right.
you got to be one of us, and then we want to know what you're gonna do with this information when we give it to you. Very protective.
That's right. You have to at least have an appointment, right?
So what's next, Professor Quincy, Dr. Quincy T?
Yes,
What's
doctor.
next?
Okay.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, I'm working on this civil rights fundraising book, which is taking some time because I want to be careful, of course. But it's exciting, and it's sort of leading me to think broadly about why movements need money. As you know, Black Lives Matter is if following the news, right? Black Lives Matter was going through quite a bit about its finances, and it had an influx of funds after George Floyd's killing in 2020, and so they're dealing with what happened with the money and so forth, and it's just reminds us that when we're talking about and concerned about what happened with the money, we're not talking about why the money itself was needed. Right. What does it mean that it's so that to fight for social justice, we have to have money to do it? Right. That's a problem. Right. And this work that I'm doing for this book is really centering why activists needed money, right, to carry on the struggle. And part of that is because Black folk were intentionally economically marginalized. Right. And so therefore whites could lay economic reprisals on them, fire them from their jobs, or find ways to imprison them, right, and force them to pay bail, right? Like this is about economics largely, right? And so the fight for civil rights is not just about rights; it's about economy. And I think this book on fundraising is helping me see that much more clearly. So that's what's next, and that's what I'm doing.
We absolutely look forward to it. Danielle, you have one final question for him before we end the broadcast?
No, I think I'm okay. He's just such a a vault of information. It's exciting to hear, and like I said, just very empowering. And it just gives more validity to what we do as beauty and barber professionals, because people think, oh, it's just a haircut. Oh, you just do hair. And there's so much more behind it. So I just appreciate the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do. So I'm excited for you, Dr. Mills.
Thank you, and thank you both for all your support. It really means a lot to me. So I do appreciate it considerably.
Yes, we're definitely going to keep you on the radar in this industry. Everybody needs to know who you are. And if you have not gotten this book, my fellow professionals, Cutting Along the Color Line, get it. It's a phenomenal read. Get it. It was a part of our book club, and we've had Dr. Mills and we've read through the book. So get it, everybody. Yes. Dr. Mills, thank you for joining us today. We absolutely appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thanks for having me. Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.